Good afternoon, everyone. Since I have a loose mic, I can move around a little bit. um, I just want to invite you guys, or thank you for coming today. I think I know most everyone in the room, but my name is Vana Miramontes. I am the new wastewater permitting section manager. For those of you that knew Chris Linendahl, I'm the new Chris Linendahl. So, um, with that, we're going to, I think the protocol is we introduce ourselves, you guys introduce yourselves, but I do want to let you know before I forget, um, we're going to change up the agenda a little because Greg has another meeting. So we're going to talk about the IP updates first, correct? Okay. 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 So I'm going to start here with Dr. Joy.
Oh, my name is Joy Alabi. I'm with the CAFO program of the TCQ, the Water Quality Division. Thank you.
Rebecca Villalba, team leader for the Stormwater Team, Water Quality Division.
And I'm Greg Easley. I manage the Water Quality Assessment section of the Water Quality Division.
And I'm Laurie Fleet with the Wastewater Permitting Section.
Travis Tim, team leader for the Customer Information and Assistance Team.
I think typically we go around the room, so I'll just let you. Oh, you got it? Okay, go ahead. She's got it covered. Good.
Hi, Lauren Willis with the Guadalupe Blanco River Authority. I'm the manager of environmental science.
Hi, I'm Bobby Chavez. I work with Joy on the CAFO program.
Ann Rogers Harrison. I head up the water quality program at Texas Parks and Wildlife Department.
Tony Spears, Quad Vest. I'm the Chief Operating Officer there.
Denise Ehrlich, Gulf Coast Authority. I'm the Senior Compliance Coordinator.
Sarah Bergen, attorney at Bracewell.
Alyssa Cook, Water Quality Division, TCEQ.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I'm with Alyssa, also with TCQ. We work with Rebecca in Stormwater.
Okay, I think we also want to welcome those of you that are watching. Thank you for tuning in. So I think we're just going to start with Greg then to talk about the IPs.
All right, thank you for accommodating the change in schedule there. First, actually, I didn't tell you, Ivana, but I also have a rule update I want to give after the IP revision, but we'll start with the IPs, or the implementation procedures that we use to in wastewater permitting in the division, which essentially is kind of the roadmap for implementing water quality standards in our permitting program. So we normally do a periodic revision of that document, and we're kind of embarking on a large revision, I should say, more so in the sense of that we're going to work in parallel with the Water Quality Standards Group as they do their triennial revision of the Texas Surface Water Quality Standards. So we're going to work in parallel with that group and also revise the implementation procedures at the same time. So that process is targeted to culminate in September of 2021. So we're a little ways out, obviously, but we've already gone through a kind of a very preliminary early comment period on both the water quality standards and the implementation procedures, and we'll soon, later this year, we'll be putting out some content for folks to review in anticipation of some stakeholder meetings that will start in early 2020. So keep your eyes open for those milestones, and we'll certainly do everything we can to notify folks through our normal channels when these particular stages open up. We still also hope to fit in before this main revision kind of a quick update to the document just to memorialize a couple of agreements that we made with EPA. It's been quite a while now, actually, and we've actually been using them in practice in our permitting program. But the pH evaluation procedures and the whole effluent toxicity reasonable potential determination procedures that we again worked out with EPA a little while back. So hopefully we can fit in just a quick update with, you know, as little administrative process as possible, but certainly do, you know, the due public notice on those and everything else. So keep your eye out for that as well. So that's really all I wanted to say on the IPs. Does anyone have any questions on that topic? Yes.
Did you say work group meetings will start when? In the
Early 2020?
early next year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's the same schedule as the water quality standards revision as well. Any other questions? All right, real quick, let me also put in a plug on the, just skip to rule updates temporarily. The Chapter 312 rules, for those who've been following this work group, know that we've been in the process of updating those rules, enhancing them, and we're scheduled to kick off the official, what am I trying to say, the official rulemaking process a little earlier in the summer, but obviously that didn't pan out. So executive management needed a little more time to consider some of the things that we were proposing to revise, and so I think they're just about ready to turn us loose to initiate the formal rulemaking process. So it's looking like that should kick off, and by that I mean, well, we go to our commissioners to get permission to propose these rules on October 9th. Don't hold us to that date yet, but that's kind of our target. So we'll definitely get the word out when we know for sure that that's when it's going to start. But that's the date we've scheduled for now, and hopefully we'll keep that schedule moving forward. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. That's coming up pretty soon. So any questions about?
Does that mean going to agenda on October 9th? Is that what the
Yes.
plan is? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks for letting me go first. And
Thank you, Greg. Okay, now we're going to go to Joy is going to talk to us, I think, about the CAFO permit, general permit, correct?
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody, once again. My name is Joy. I'm providing this update on the CAFO general permit. The commissioners approved the permit on June 26, 2019. This permit authorizes the discharge of manure, sludge, and wastewater into or adjacent to water in the state by concentrated animal feeding operations only during chronic or catastrophic rainfall events or catastrophic conditions that cause an overflow. The GP becomes effective on July 20th, 2019. And the renewal period begins on July 21st through January 16th, 2020. So it begins on July 21st, 2019 through January 16, 2020. So permittees have 180 days to submit their renewal application to continue to be authorized under the permit. The renewal applications will be made available on July 20th. Both in e-permit and the paper forms will be available. Now, if you renew online, you will pay $75. If you submit paper forms, you pay $100. And also, starting sometime on Friday, a copy of the permit, the fact sheet, and the commissioner's response to public comments will be made available on the TCQ website. You just search for, using the permit number TXG920000. We have copies of the GP here, bound copies, so in case you are interested, I brought some. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Moving right along, Rebecca is going to talk to us about the renewal of the MS4 Phase 2.
Okay. Hi. Again, this is Rebecca. All of you might have known, this permit regulates the municipal separate storm sewer systems, as we know, MS4s, the small ones. So those are based on the 2010 and 2000 U.S. Census. So the permit was delayed getting issued, and it was issued January 23rd of this year. So that started the 180-day comment renewal period. So the renewal period ends this month, next week on July 23rd. Our universe is 570 approximately, and so far we've only received 113 applications, which includes 18 waivers. So we're missing, a lot of applications, over 400. Last renewal period, during the last month of renewal, we did receive 460 applications in that month. So we'll see how many come in. So we hope that entities do apply on time, because if you don't apply on time to renew, then that is a violation, and then enforcement will be, doing what they need to do. We did conduct 6 workshops, MS4 workshops across the state, starting in April, and we ended our last one in June, and we had really good attendance. Over about 65% of our universe attended those workshops. So we were hoping that, through the workshops, we clarify what we mean by this. Stormwater management programs need to be clear, specific, and measurable. We also discussed how to prepare the annual report, and basically how to comply with the new general permit that is based on the EPA federal remand rule that required us to have a slightly different permit, and it mandates that the stormwater management programs, like I said, be more specific and measurable and track things. So through those workshops, we hope that entities understand, how to do that, and maybe that's why they're not getting their swamps yet, because they're really trying hard to update them and make them be really perfect. Unfortunately, some of the ones that we've already received, we've done a preliminary review to test our checklist, and they're not up to par, so we will have to send notices of deficiency. But in any case, if we do send a notice of deficiency, we ask that you please reply as soon as possible so that we can keep this moving. We do have a goal of getting them all technically complete by January of next year, the end of January. So we have 6 months to work through them, just like we did the last permit cycle. We were very successful last time. I think we were at 94% of them last time were technically complete within 6 months. But we do need your help in making sure that if you still have your stormwater management program that hasn't been submitted, your application, that you do your best to get it to where it's clear, specific, and measurable. And if not, if we have to send a notice of deficiency, please respond as soon as possible and track changes electronically so that we can address things and keep moving forward as quickly as possible. So that's all that we wanted to say regarding the renewal period for the permit, as well as just to remind you that EPA is going to be involved in reviewing some of these applications and stormwater management programs. We're still working the process with them. So we'll see how that works. So your swamp may be one that they get to review. In addition, we've had some questions regarding how the delay of the permit that was delayed for 6 weeks, how that affects annual reports, specifically for those of you that are under a fiscal year. So just to let you know that, if you're not changing your reporting period, it's not going to change it. And those 6 weeks that were delayed can be reported in your first annual report under this permit cycle. So if you have any more questions or your situation is unique, please give us a call. We'll be happy to discuss that with you. But anyway, that's all we have on the small MS4 general permit. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Rebecca. I think you're up next. Yes. Yeah. So now we're going to cover our rule updates. And we have Rebecca, and then we'll go to Lori, and she will talk about the rule petition from the City of Austin.
Okay. So now we'll talk briefly about the Clean Water Act Analytical Methods Update Rule. We call it the MUR rule. And so for that, we've had a couple of delayed meetings meetings that have been rescheduled due to permitting timeframes, and staff resources, that have been put elsewhere because of, unfortunately, fires and those things. And I'm talking about real fires, okay, not just fires. But anyway, so now we have a new date, and it's August 20th of next month. And the meeting is scheduled to be in Building F, room 2210. That's our conference room in Building F on the second floor. And it will start at 1:30 and is scheduled to end at 4. So we will go ahead and discuss our process of implementing some of the items that we have left in the method update rule, such as rulemaking, implementation procedures, and other guidance as how this applies to the permit applications. But please note that we did send the memo, as I mentioned before, that was signed by our, actually Greg, to our NELAC accreditation folks. And the 3 methods that we asked for accreditation, that accreditation was made available. The deadline is August 28th of this year. After that date, you need to be using a accredited laboratory that is using those methods for the analyte that you are working under. If we didn't have accreditation, then you could continue using the previous methods, but now that we have accreditation available as of August 28th, you need to start using those new methods. But further guidance, there's a lot more other pieces to this rule that we need to let you know and discuss and get your feedback. In addition, in case you didn't know, EPA already published the proposed 2019 methods update rules. So if you need to review that and provide comments, to EPA, feel free to do that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to give an update on behalf of Rebecca Moore. She's the project manager on the City of Austin rule petition. We are calling that the beneficial reuse credits rule. Essentially, it is amending chapters 309 and 222. Back in March of 2016, we received a petition from the City of Austin. The commission granted that petition for rulemaking in May of 2016. And this rulemaking is to amend our rules in response to that petition. So the proposed rulemaking in chapters 222 and 309 would give an applicant for a Texas land application permit, what we call a TLAP permit, the option to reduce the acreage required for land application of treated domestic wastewater by obtaining a beneficial reuse credit, which accounts for beneficial reuse of water that doesn't go to the applicant's permitted irrigation site. So if they're reusing it for irrigation, say on a golf course or on landscaping of road right-of-ways, they would be able to claim that reuse in lieu of their acreage, the required acreage. So they would be able to reduce that required acreage. The rulemaking is not compulsory. You don't have to apply for the beneficial reuse credit. It's optional. And so those rules would only apply in the event that you were seeking the beneficial reuse credit. The proposed rules were published in the Texas Register on June 28th. A public hearing is scheduled on July 25th at 10 a.m. in this room, which is Building E, room 201S, our agenda room. Are there any questions on the beneficial reuse credit rule?
Do the proposed rules affect storage requirements as well, or just land acreage?
Just the land acreage. The storage pond, the sizing for that did not change. Any other questions?
When is the final end of public comment?
I would have to recalculate, but it's going to be 30 days from June 28th. Didn't write that one down. I should have. I apologize. If you'll go to the Texas Register publication, it does state what the end of comment date is. Or you can come to the meeting. Other questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Lori. I think Lori is going to continue the meeting with some program updates, and then I will have some announcements at the end.
Okay, so compliance monitoring. This is specifically related to narrative conditions. So the Federal Electronic Reporting Rule, which is 40 CFR Part 127, required us to start sharing certain information with EPA electronically, both collecting it from permittees electronically and sharing it with them electronically. And one of those is the narrative conditions and permits. So a narrative condition is a requirement that you submit, say, a report by a certain deadline. And it has to have a date certain. So, for instance, if it says you have to submit a thermal plume study plan within 180 days of your permit issuance date, that is now going to be shared with EPA's, it's going to be entered into EPA's database. And so what will happen is that narrative condition, the requirement for that plan to be submitted within, by X date, is going to be entered into ISIS, which is EPA's database. And most permittees are familiar with discharge monitoring reports and the fact that we populate those discharge monitoring requirements into ISIS as well. And ISIS, which is, again, EPA's database, it tracks whether or not you submit that information. And so if you don't submit your discharge monitoring reports when they're due, the system will flag DMR non-receipt. And so the compliance and enforcement side of our agency can literally generate a report and issue violations for non-receipt. The narrative conditions are going to work very similar to that. So if we put in that you have a study report due to us by December 3rd of 2019, if December 3rd comes around and goes by and we do not populate that you submitted that report, it will flag as a violation. So the reason I'm bringing that to y'all is so that you are a little more aware of the requirements in your permit and to be advised that they're going to be tracked a little closer because they're going to be system generated. Instead of people making sure that, hey, did we get that report? It's going to be more of an automated process. So I would encourage everyone to read your permit closely. If there are any requirements that require you to submit something to this agency, that you do so by the time frame in the permit. Now, that being said, there are some of our requirements that say you submit like your notice of completion. If you're moving from phase 1 to phase 2 of the permit, it requires you to submit a notice of completion report to us, notifying us that you're moving from one phase to the next. And the requirement is that you do that, when you move to that phase. Because there's not a date certain on when that happens, we can't populate that as a narrative condition, because in order for it to be a narrative condition in the database, the due date is a required field. So that's just something else to consider, is not that we're not paying attention to those, but those will not be an automated tracking of compliance. Are there any questions on narrative conditions or compliance monitoring? Okay. With that, I guess I will jump right into improving permit processing timeframes. This is one of our agenda items that we've been talking about since January. We could see from our tracking that, well, let me back up. We have a legislative performance measure that says we have to issue 85% of our permits on time within these established timeframes. And we started seeing toward the end of last year that this year was going to be very difficult to meet our percent on time. And we started exploring ways internally to shave time off our processing time frames. And so I'll just go through a couple of the things that we've done internally, because I think it's important for y'all to understand that we're cleaning up our own shop too. Not just asking y'all to help us. We have we've started discussing having a meeting every Monday morning and talking about delayed permits, talking about why they're delayed, establishing an action plan to get them moving. By the time we're talking about them in that meeting, they literally, if the permit doesn't start moving from that point forward within the next 2 weeks, it's going to exceed our time frames. Something y'all may have noticed is we have started emailing the draft permit out to applicants for their draft review. In addition to emailing them out for applicants to review, we used to do that weekly, so once a week we would send those emails out. We are now going to be doing that daily. And with those daily emails, we are also reducing the time frame for applicants to review their permits. So back when we were mailing them with U.S. Postal Service, we were giving applicants 10 days, 10 calendar days, because obviously you had to wait for it to get to you in the mail. Now that there's no mail time, you're getting it instantaneously. We're going to be shaving 3 days off of that time frame. So rather than 10 days for review, you will have 7 days. So if you receive it in your email on Monday, your comments or draft acceptance is due the following Monday. Something else that we're doing is we are now filing our permits with the chief clerk's office. So once you accept the draft permit, we file it with the chief clerk's office and they process it for noticing, do all the mailing out for notices, etc. We used to do that weekly. We are now going to be doing that daily. Something else y'all might have noticed is our administrative notices of deficiency. So if there's any issues with any deficiencies in the administrative application, we've now started emailing those notices of deficiency out rather than mailing them. Now we do still send a mailed copy of the letter because Chapter 281.18 requires us to send a certified letter with a 30-day response time. So by rule, we are required to still send that letter with a 30-day response. We are emailing and we are asking that y'all respond to that email. Just because we have to give you the 30 days, we're hoping that you will not take the 30 days. So if it's something simple that you can, email right back to us, we would greatly appreciate that so that we can shave those 30 days out of the clock, or at least 29 of them. We've also developed some additional internal report processes, some internal reporting just to check where we are, see where delays are occurring, that sort of thing. So we're just tracking them a little bit better. And as I mentioned when I first started this, we started talking with this work group about some things that y'all could do to help us. And two things that really have delayed a lot of our permits is public notice delays. Either getting the notice published in a timely manner or submitting all of the proof of publication documents. And so right now, as of last Friday, we have 50 permits that are being delayed because the Nori or the NAPTI either haven't been published, or the proof of publication hasn't been submitted, or the documentation was submitted incorrect. So we just ask that y'all publish notice as soon as you get it, and be sure to provide those verification documents as quickly as possible as well. And because we've been asking since January, we kind of asked it first and then we kind of elevated. We've now come to the point where we've elevated to management that we're not seeing any appreciable improvement. Back in January, we were at about 40-something permits. We're now at 50. It's basically just maintaining status quo is what we've seen over the last 6 months. And so we have elevated this issue to our management. And whenever we don't get our get that documentation in a timely manner, we have been reaching out to applicants. We've been emailing saying, hey, this was due, or this was submitted, but it was incorrect. Can you please submit another one? So we have been working, when we see that they're delayed, we've been reaching out. And so I just want to remind folks that Chapter 39, Section 405A, does allow the executive director to return an application for failure to complete notice within the established timeframes. And we don't want to have to go down that route. If it's a renewal application and we were to return it, the applicant would immediately be operating without a permit, so they would be in an immediate noncompliance, which can lead to $10,000 per day violation. Additionally, when they come back in for when they do submit a new application, it is considered a new application, meaning that it would be subject to contested case hearing, whereas renewal applications typically don't qualify for contested case hearings. So we really don't want to go down that route of having to return an application, which is why I'm pleading with you. Please publish your notice in a timely manner, get the documentation to us quickly. If there is problems with the documentation, you're missing a page, or if the notice doesn't have the newspaper name and date, we'll reach out to you. But we have, as an example, we have a couple of applications that the notice of intent of the Nori, notice of receipt and intent to obtain permit. The Nori was mailed out in November of last year. That's 7 months. And it's like, we can do better. We can do better. So I would just encourage y'all to please publish your notices in a timely manner. So I guess I'll move on to, are there any questions about notices and timeframes?
So kind of coming at this from the public comment side of things, we're not a permit applicant, but we review permits throughout the state. And I know did you say when the NAPD is issued that a copy of the draft permit will now get filed with the chief clerk's office automatically? Or there's been some confusion on our end on how we can get that. And we usually kind of track it down through the permit writer side of things, through the municipal industrial permit sections. Or we could go to a library and get it, but as a state agency, that's just not practical. So a lot of times we're sort of like scrambling on how do we find a copy of this draft permit. So did you say that there's a possibility that could get filed with the chief clerk's office, or?
So what we file, whenever the applicant accepts the draft permit, we file the entire central records file with the chief clerk's office, which includes the draft permit, the fact sheet, the public notice, and then the entire application.
Okay.
So all of that is in the chief clerk's office, and it remains in the chief clerk's office throughout the entire, not just throughout the entire public comment period, but all the way through permit issuance. So if we get public meeting request or a hearing request, that file with all of those components is downstairs, building F, first floor, chief clerk's office.
And has that been the case?
That has been the case.
Because so many times we get the NAPD, because we get automatic email notifications of Noris and NAPDs on every permit in the state. So we get the notices, and then we go to the chief clerk's office, and they say, oh, well, that file is still with the permit writer.
Now,
so
for the Nori, it would be.
Yeah.
So for the Nori, the file, once it's administratively complete, is when the Nori is drafted, and the Nori is filed. Just the Nori, the notice itself.
Not the application.
Right.
Yeah.
It's filed downstairs with the chief clerk's office, and then they do all the mail outs that they do. But simultaneous, it's kind of a parallel process. So the Nori is going downstairs for notice, while the actual permit file, the application, is being routed for technical review.
Sure.
And so if you're looking at a Nori, the file is going to be still in technical review, and there will likely not be a draft permit yet because it is still in technical review.
Right.
It's once it becomes tech complete and we draft the permit, send it out for draft acceptance, the applicant accepts the draft permit. At that point is when the entire file, the application, the draft permit, fact sheet, and the NAPD get filed.
So it's not just with the issuance of the NAPD by TCQ, it's when the applicant accepts all that. Okay. And is that usually a delay of a couple days or a week?
By the time the notice is issued, the NAPD is issued by the chief clerk's office. Essentially, by the time you get it, the file should be downstairs.
Okay.
And the only reason it would not be downstairs is if the file was remanded for some reason. So sometimes we'll have an applicant call us and say, oh my goodness, I just realized the notice,
Right.
my address is wrong.
Right.
And so we'll have to remand the file to correct that.
Okay. And I can take this offline, but we may have we'd like to see some possibilities of issuing comments early on in the process, like during the Nori, when we hear about a permit applicant and we have some concerns about that receiving water or something, to issue a comment letter, but without really knowing what the applicant has applied for, we're sort of limited in waiting until the NAPD, and that gives us only 30 days. And also, there's also already a draft permit. What we'd like to do sometime is get our comment in before the draft permit comes out. But that's something we can figure
we can
out how
talk
to
about.
get a better handle on how to get a copy of what's coming
And
out.
I will say, just for the overall forum, is that the applicant is required, when the Nori when it's declared admin complete and the Nori is issued, the applicant is required at that time, the same time they publish that Nori in the newspaper, they are required to place that application in the public viewing location. So I know for a state agency, you can't run down to Houston, down to the library in every town in Texas. That application is available for local individuals. Yes. But I did just want to reiterate that the application is available to the public in that local public place. Any other questions?
I just,
Yes.
If you go to the central file room, you can request to view the file during the Nori period, but they have to go and you have to give them advance notice and they have to retrieve it. And so it does stop work on the permit file, but you can view it.
That is correct. At any point in time, all of our records are public information. And so if you needed to get a copy of that application, you could request a public information. You could either come over to the chief clerk's office or do a PIR, a public information request, for a copy of the application. So that's always a possibility because we're subject to the Freedom of Information Act. Other questions? Okay, then I'll dive right into what I hope and think is our last topic. This past legislative session, 86th legislature, we ended up with 2 bills that may require implementation activities on our part. The more, the bigger one from a workload perspective and as well as an impact perspective, House Bill 2771. It transferred permitting authority for discharges of produced water, hydrostatic test water, and gas plant effluent into water in the state, resulting from certain oil and gas activities. That was, again, the permitting authority for those effluents transferred from the Railroad Commission to TCEQ. The bill directs TCEQ to seek delegation authority from EPA for issuance of those discharges. So when we got delegation back in 1998, at that time, oil and gas facilities in Texas were regulated, and they still are, by the Railroad Commission. And so in our delegation, our memorandum of agreement with EPA, it specifically cites that any facilities under these specific SIC codes are not delegated to TCEQ. And so with this bill, we are going to have to amend our delegation authority to now seek authorization from EPA to issue discharges of that produced water, hydrostatic test water, and gas plant effluent. Now the bill required us to submit our application by September 1 of 2021. It's like, oh, you got 2 years. No. It is a very arduous process. We are going to have to do, just to give you and this is very high level implementation steps, because we're still internally working through all of the smaller steps that go into this. But ultimately, we're going to have to initiate rulemaking to adopt by reference any effluent limitation guidelines that are applicable to these discharges. Right now, we know that 40 CFR Part 435 is one that we're going to have to adopt by reference. So there's a rulemaking to do. We're going to have to revise our memorandum of understanding with the Railroad Commission to sort that out, and that is in Chapter 7. So it is also a rulemaking. Railroad Commission has to, they're going to have to do their rulemaking, and then we have to adopt their rulemaking. So it's both state agencies doing a rulemaking. So that's going to take some time and effort and coordination. And then the last part is ultimately amendment of our MPDS delegation, essentially putting together our application and all of its components. For example, we have to get an Attorney General opinion to basically say, yes, TCQ has state authority over these discharges. It's okay to EPA to delegate. So we have to get that, and that is a 4 to 6 month process in and of itself. And so when you start thinking about those major categories of steps, and then each one of those having many, many, many interim steps, it's going to take us a lot of time and effort to make that happen. So that's House Bill 2771. Are there any questions related to that bill? We have a lot of questions. We'll be getting to those as we go through that process. The second bill is House Bill 1300. It directs Texas Parks and Wildlife to establish a cultivated oyster mariculture program. And because we have an aquaculture general permit that authorizes discharges from aquaculture facilities, primarily our implementation related to that bill would be to work with Parks and Wildlife as they establish that program, and then evaluating our aquaculture general permit to determine if any revisions to that are necessary in order to authorize discharges from these new facilities. Any questions on that? Okay, and then lastly, this was not in the 86th legislature, but one that we are circling back on. House Bill 2031 was related to marine seawater desalination. So last legislative session, we were required to adopt a expedited process for marine seawater desalination projects. And initially, the bill required applicants to coordinate with Texas Parks and Wildlife and the General Land Office on the location for their discharges. It also tasked Texas Parks and Wildlife and the General Land Office with conducting a study to establish discharge zones. Parks and GLO have completed that. They completed that last August. And so once they've completed their study, we are required to adopt those discharge zones. So the purpose of bringing up House Bill 2031 is to let y'all know that we are initiating rulemaking to adopt the discharge zones in the Texas Parks and Wildlife and General Land Office study that they presented. And it's available, that study is available on their website if anybody's interested. But we are initiating the rulemaking, and we expect to be ready to go to public notice, aka go to commission agenda for approval to publish that rulemaking in November of this year. Any questions on that one? Okay. With that, I'll turn it back over to Ms.
Thank you, Lori. I did want to mention that we are going to have a stakeholder meeting as well once we get more into working on House Bill 2771 for the produced water, that we're also going to have a stakeholder meeting for that, but we don't have a time. Okay. I hope you guys got our handout here. We have our next meeting on October 15th for this group. We also have our autumn environmental conference coming up October 8th through 10th. I believe that we will have presenters there, I think, for all of our permitting programs. One of the most exciting things we have upcoming is our pre-treatment stakeholders meeting. So that is September 19th from 1 to 4. I hope you guys can plan to attend that. We're just going to be talking about our program and discussing our path forward. Is there any things maybe we can do differently or any changes we might want to make? So we're looking at a meeting with you guys, looking forward to that. As Rebecca mentioned, we have the MUR stakeholder meeting in August. So with that, do you guys have any questions for me or anyone or anything I can get back with you on? No? Okay, well, as always, we appreciate you guys coming, and thank you, Anne, for your questions. Okay, thank you very much.